So far we've seen how using the SAP HANA Extended Application Services, we can create projects, set up the access control on those projects, and then do both simple and advanced HTML content that will be served out of the HANA appliance. Now let's begin to look at some of the development artifacts that we can create for writing logic and creating services. And the first of those is the ability to create OData-based REST services. And these types of services are ideally suited for handling events on the client side and responding with data that can be injected into your user interface, into your web page. They're also very easy to build because we have a nice reusable framework within the HANA Extended Application Services that does most of the processing for you for the creation of the service. We need only define an XS OData document to describe which database artifacts we want to use as the source of our service, and all the other runtime processing will be handled for us by the HANA Extended Application Services. So let's begin by creating another folder within our project, and we'll call this one Services, just so we can separate out our services from our user interface, from any server-side logic that we might place into this project. Now I want to create a service, an OData service, that will expose my business partner table. So I'll begin by creating a file, and I'll name it buyer.xsodata. Now there's no specialized editor for XSOData. Rather than do it in Notepad, I'm just going to tell it to use the regular text editor. The syntax is fairly straightforward. I say service, namespace, and then I supply a namespace, and this is really just for documentation purposes inside the service itself. This doesn't control or generate anything in the system. And now I get to the meat of the content of the OData service. I have to give it the name of a database artifact that I want to expose. And I can expose tables, views, analytic views, attribute views, pretty much anything I want. Now, I know that in my schema, TechEd EPM, I have a table called Business Partner, and that's what I want to expose in this service. So I need only give the name here. So TechEd EPM is the name of the schema, and then the name of the package, TechEd EPM B, and then Business Partner. It's the name of the table, and then I have to give it the name, what entity name I want it to be exposed as in the service. And I'll just say buyer is the entity name. Alright, that's really all there is to it. I can now go ahead and save my service and commit it to the repository. And now activate. We're now ready to test this service, and we can test it directly in the web browser. Alright, so bring up the web browser. We'll go directly to the path where our service definition file is located. So, videos, and then services, and then buyer.xsodata. And when we access the document itself, we see a small definition file that shows us the name of all the entities that are exposed. It is possible to describe multiple entities and the relationship between entities as well, and that's what we would see here. We have a very simple OData document. There's one entity, so not a whole lot of information to see there. Maybe we would add $, metadata, and then we inspect the service interface, and we can see all the fields and their data types. So another environment, another programming language could introspect the service interface and get all the information that it needs for dynamically calling and processing the service. We can also begin to see the data as well. If we put in the entity name, and there's a lot of records in here, and I don't necessarily want to get them all back, so maybe I'll add a parameter, top equals 10 here. And then I get just the top 10 records back. So all these URL parameters like top equals 10, and there's filter and grouping, these are all defined by the standard of OData, and they're already implemented for you by the OData framework inside the HANA Extended Application Services. So you get various capabilities for sorting, for paging through the data, for grouping the data, and the calculation, the logic to do all that. You don't have to write any of that. It's all provided by the built-in service. Now, likewise, we're seeing the Atom format for the data, but we also support JSON. So if I just add format equals JSON, lowercase, then you see the JSON format. Now, everything you've seen here is really just for developers to be able to test their services. This is not meant to be end-user readable. It's human readable, but this isn't how we want to present data to the end user. But it does let us test the service before we even build the user interface. But of course, you want to then consume this service in a user interface, and in particular with SAP UI5, we have some very nice tools to be able to bind OData services directly to the UI elements, and that's really the next step that I want to show you here is how we could consume this service in SAP UI5. So now for a more extensive test of our OData service, let's see how it's consumed by SAP UI5. To save a little time, I've gone ahead and created another SAP UI5 page and view. And if we look at this view, it's different because what we have is we're declaring a model, an OData model, and this is how we specify which service we want to consume. So I'm just giving it the relative URL that points to my buyer.xsodata service, which we created in the previous steps. Then I go ahead and create a table control. I set up columns in that table control, so partner ID, email address, company name. I set the model object into the table, and then I do a table bind rows, and this is where we specify the entity name, because we can have multiple entities in a single service. So we see how we've connected to both the service itself, the OData service, and the particular entity in the OData service that we want to fill the rows of our table. And this is it. There's really no other programming that I had to do here. By binding, I'll automatically get client-side scrolling, I'll get sort, filter, and I'll show you all this from the front end. I'll turn on the development tools in Chrome and show you this. So let's go ahead and bring up this web page. OData HTML, OData demo.html, and I have my table control, and it's filled with the data. As I scroll through here, I get nice client-side scrolling. If I had enough data, it would go back in batches and retrieve like 100 records at a time and bring them down to the client side. It's using the top to tell it how large a batch is, and another parameter to tell it where to start, so that we can very efficiently pull down chunks of data. We also have built-in sorting and filtering. So if I sort here, I could come here and filter. And I didn't have to program any of that. That's one of the nice things. The use of the standard UI element of SAP UI5 and the functionality that's already built into the OData service framework. Really, all that functionality is provided for me. If I come here and I look at the development tools, maybe give me just a little bit more screen space here. You'll see when I do something here, for instance, if I tell it to sort descending on the partner ID, see there was another request made to the buyer to the service. Size this column. And it goes ahead and puts skip 0 because we're at the top of the scroll bar. Top 45, that's getting all 45 records. But then it appends an order by, partner ID, descending. And the UI element is building this URL dynamically, and then on the server side, the generic OData service framework is interpreting these URL parameters, generating queries that go into the HANA database, and then returning the results in a way that's readily consumable on the client side. For instance, here let's go ahead and change this, and let's do a filter. Say, give me all the records. The company name is SAP. Similar situation here. The URL, same base URL, but now we do we still have the order by, but now we add the filter criteria index of company name SAP. And the OData service definition, the standard that OData is based upon, has various criteria for not just doing simple filters, but also doing more complex knots and patterns and so forth. So we can really leverage the power of the HANA database as well behind the scenes to do those queries and quickly return the data to the user interface.